Before the thunder of war, there was quiet. It is the early 1920s. The Great War, what we now call the First World War, has ended. Fields in France and Belgium still bear its scars. But across the globe, a yearning for peace drifts like morning mist. Soldiers return home to rebuild. Families grieve and nations, bruised and broken, search for something new, something better. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was meant to ensure that such a war would never come again. It held hope and also seeds of bitterness. Germany, burdened with reparations and national humiliation, struggled beneath the weight of imposed guilt. Elsewhere, new borders were drawn, empires dissolved, and uncertainty grew like a shadow at twilight. Then came the Roaring Twenties, a decade of dance and jazz, of innovation and illusion. In cities like New York, Berlin, Paris, and Tokyo, life surged with energy. Yet beneath the surface, the world's economy rested on fragile ground. When the stock market crashed in 1929, that ground gave way. The Great Depression wrapped its fingers around the globe, pulling millions into poverty. People began to question everything, governments, systems, even hope itself. In these uncertain times, new voices rose. In the United Kingdom, a man named Winston Churchill, sharp of mind and rich in language, warned of gathering clouds even as others longed for calm. Across the Atlantic, Franklin Delano Roosevelt began to speak of a New Deal, of lifting the spirits of a weary nation with dignity, compassion, and resolve. To the east, Joseph Stalin solidified his hold on the Soviet Union, promising strength through unity, even as silence often followed dissent. And in Germany, a former soldier named Adolf Hitler began to speak to crowded halls. He offered restoration, pride, and power to those willing to listen and willing to forget the cost. This, then, is our world before the war, a world caught between memory and promise, between healing and unrest. A world of people, each seeking a future that feels just out of reach. In this podcast, we won't shout history. We'll listen to it, gently, honestly, with care. Because before the storm, there is always stillness. The 1930s unfolded with quiet tension. Across the world, people watched, waited, hoped. But beneath the stillness, the ground was shifting. In Germany, a nation left bruised by war and burdened by debt turned its gaze to a new kind of leader. His name was Adolf Hitler. Once a soldier, now a speaker with a stirring voice and unyielding vision. He promised pride, he promised order, and he promised something that many, in their hardship, desperately wanted: a return to greatness. In 1933, Hitler rose to power. What followed was swift and unsettling. Civil liberties dissolved, political opponents silenced, and a new ideology planted, watered with propaganda and fear. Elsewhere in Europe, fascism found fertile ground. In Italy, Benito Mussolini spoke of Roman glory and imperial strength. And in Spain, civil war tore the nation apart, ushering in the rule of Francisco Franco. A rule born not of votes, but of victory. Far across the sea, another force was stirring. Japan, proud, resourceful, ambitious, turned outward. In 1931, it occupied Manchuria. In 1937, the full invasion of China began. Cities fell. Civilians suffered. But the world, still wary of war, said little. By 1938, Hitler's Germany began to expand. First, Austria welcomed in what was called the Anschluss. Then the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia. Western leaders, eager to avoid another war, chose compromise. At Munich, they gave Hitler what he asked for, hoping peace might be bought with territory. It was not. In the early hours of September 1, 1939, German forces crossed into Poland. Tanks moved through villages. Planes cut through morning skies. Civilians woke to the sound of sirens and the tremble of the earth. The world, once more, changed overnight. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany. The storm had begun. Europe was stunned. Not by surprise, perhaps, but by the sudden, irreversible fact of war. What had felt like a distant possibility was now a present reality. In the days to come, lives would shift like sand. Families would pack bags in silence. Children would learn to recognize the sound of aircraft overhead, and the world would begin a journey into darkness, together, yet apart. But even now, even in the face of war, people hoped. They wrote letters. They sang quietly in shelters. They planted gardens, just in case peace came back. Because it always begins this way, doesn't it? With hope, with a world that wishes for calm, even as the winds begin to rise. The year is 1940. War has returned to Europe, but for a moment it waits. After the fall of Poland, there is stillness, a strange quiet known as the phony war. Soldiers wait in trenches. Civilians listen to radios with held breath. Across the English Channel, Britain prepares, not knowing what tomorrow will bring. And then, the waiting ends. In the spring of 1940, Germany moves swiftly through Denmark, through Norway, and into the heart of Western Europe. The armies that had once marched slowly in the First World War now move with frightening speed. France, proud and storied, braces itself. But within weeks, German forces bypass the famed Maginot Line, sweeping through Belgium and into French soil. Cities are overtaken. Families flee. And on June 14th, Paris, beloved, historic Paris, falls under occupation. The world watches, stunned. The fall of France is not just military, it is emotional. It is the moment many realize this war is unlike the last. And across the Channel, Britain stands alone. In the summer skies of 1940, the Battle of Britain begins. It is a battle not of trenches, but of clouds and contrails. German bombers fly across the sea, seeking to break the British spirit. But in the air, brave pilots, many barely older than students, take to the skies in defense. They fight not for conquest, but for survival. The air is filled with tension and courage. London is bombed by night, a haunting chapter known as the Blitz. But through darkness, people endure. They gather in shelters. They sing. They write letters by candlelight. And Britain does not fall. Elsewhere, the war grows wider. To the east, Germany turns toward the vastness of the Soviet Union. In June 1941, the invasion begins, Operation Barbarossa. Across thousands of miles, cities burn, fields are torn apart, and millions are caught in the sweep of war. In the south, North Africa becomes a new theater. Sand replaces snow, but the pain is the same. Armies clash across deserts under a burning sun, as ancient lands become battlegrounds once more. And across the oceans, another nation watches, large, distant, and still officially at peace. The United States has offered aid, has spoken of freedom, but has not yet joined the fight. As people remain hopeful that distance might protect them from war's reach. Then, on the morning of December 7, 1941, the quiet is shattered. Pearl Harbor, a naval base in Hawaii, is struck by a surprise attack from Japanese aircraft. Ships burn. Smoke rises. Lives are lost in the morning sun. And just like that, the United States enters the war. The world, once divided by oceans and borders, is now united by a single, terrible reality. This is no longer a European war. It is a world war in truth and in name. But even now, in the midst of uncertainty, there are small acts of light. A child shares bread with a neighbor. A soldier writes poetry on torn paper. A nurse hums to comfort the wounded. This is how people endure moment by moment, heart by heart. The sky has darkened, but the story is not over. War, like nature, moves in currents. And in the years 1942 and 1943, the tide begins to shift. Across oceans and continents, ordinary people find themselves facing the extraordinary. The story of this war is not only one of nations. It is the story of sailors, nurses, codebreakers, and farmers. People who, each in their way, stood where they were needed. Let us begin on the Pacific Ocean. In June of 1942, the American and Japanese navies meet near a small cluster of islands called Midway. It is not a clash of giants, but of patience and precision. Pilots rise into the sky, not knowing if they'll return. Below, quiet radio operators intercept coded messages. Decisions are made in moments, but their echoes will last for generations. For Japanese aircraft carriers, powerful symbols of early victories are lost in the span of a day. It is not triumph born of fury, but of careful listening, of strategy, and of teamwork. For the first time in the Pacific, the sea does not move only in one direction. Half a world away, the Russian winter falls over the city of Stalingrad. Once a vibrant industrial hub along the Volga River, the city becomes a place of resilience. In the late months of 1942, German and Soviet forces engage in what will become one of the most pivotal battles of the war. But this is not just a clash of armies. It is the endurance of civilians living beneath shattered rooftops, of soldiers sharing bread in silence, of families holding on as snow gathers on broken windowsills. Stalingrad is not won in a day. It is held by hands that refuse to let go. And in February 1943, after months of suffering, the tide turns again. German forces begin to retreat. For the Soviet Union, it is a moment of breath, not relief, not yet, but breath. Then comes June 6, 1944, D-Day. As dawn breaks over the coast of France, quiet boats appear on the horizon. They are filled not with warriors in search of glory, but with young men, farmers, teachers, brothers, prepared to walk into uncertainty for the hope of freedom. British, American, Canadian, and Allied forces land along 5 beaches: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, Sword. Their boots touch sand still cold with the night. Their hearts carry letters, photographs, prayers. It is not courage without fear, it is courage alongside it. The invasion is vast, the logistics extraordinary, but the heart of it, the soul, is simple: a desire to push back the darkness, to return what was taken, to say this far, no further. And in the towns of Normandy, bells ring once more. These moments, Midway, Stalingrad, D-Day, are not just victories in a ledger. They are the turning of something deeper. They are proof that when people gather, when they lean into hardship with quiet strength, change is possible. Even in war, we often think of history in maps and lines, in dates and declarations. But its truest form is found in the eyes of a nurse stitching wounds beneath a flickering lamp, in the hands of a mother baking bread under blackout curtains, in the voice of a radio broadcaster speaking hope into the night. These are the things that shift the world, not only armies but humanity. The war is not over, but the way forward has begun to appear, faint at first, like light under a heavy door. And so we walk with them, step by step, through the turning of the tide. By 1944, the world had been at war for nearly 5 years. But now the tide is steady. Allied forces have returned to continental Europe. Cities still smolder, skies still bear the sound of aircraft, but something has shifted, something quiet and powerful. It is the sound of liberation. From the beaches of Normandy, Allied troops begin to push east, through hedgerows and villages, over rivers and into once-occupied towns. They move, slowly, painfully, toward the heart of a broken continent. Each step forward is a return. A child seeing a soldier and smiling for the first time in years. A hidden flag brought down from an attic. A family reunited. In the east, the Red Army advances. The roads are long and the winter is cold, but the journey continues through Poland, Hungary, and into Germany. And then, in spring of 1945, the gates begin to open. Concentration camps, Auschwitz, Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen, are liberated. What is found inside defies understanding. We do not need to dwell in the horror. Others already have. But let us pause, softly, for those who survived, who held on to hope in the darkest corners of humanity. Let us honor the courage of those who walked into those places, offering blankets, water, and words, however fragile. In May of 1945, the war in Europe comes to an end. Berlin falls. Adolf Hitler is gone. And in cities across the continent, silence settles, a new silence. Not of fear, but of disbelief. There are no great parades, not at first. Only the sound of boots stepping slowly toward home. People begin to clean, to rebuild, to breathe again. The work is immense. The grief, deep. But morning has come. Yet across the world, in the Pacific, the war is not over. Japan continues to resist. The fighting is fierce. On small islands, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, lives are lost by the thousands. The sea is heavy with sorrow. Then, in August 1945, something never seen before darkens the sky. Two cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, feel the weight of fire born not from flame, but from science. The atomic bomb. This power ends the war and changes the world forever. There is no need to speak of numbers. Instead, let us speak of one mother, one child, one city learning how to live again. Let us remember the silence that followed. On August 15, 1945, Japan surrenders. The war is over, and the earth, long scarred by conflict, begins to heal. People begin to plant gardens where craters once were. Books are opened. Letters are sent. Music is played again in public squares. A quiet vow takes root: never again. Nations gather. The United Nations is born. Old enemies speak, cautiously, of peace. And new generations are born into a world weary of war but open to possibility. This is how peace returns, not all at once, but in pieces, in kindness, in forgiveness, in the gentle work of those who choose to begin again. The war has ended, but the echo remains. And from that echo, a new sound begins. The sound of rebuilding, of stories shared, of hands held, of mourning, at last breaking over a waiting world. After the final bombs fell and the last soldiers laid down their arms, the world stood still for a moment. A long breath held between past and future. What now? What do you do after everything changes? You begin again, not with grand speeches or sudden joy, but with small acts of rebuilding. Sweeping broken glass, sharing a loaf of bread, writing a law that says, "This will not happen again." And so the world, scarred but not broken, began to listen, to remember, to build not just homes and bridges, but hope. In the autumn of 1945, leaders from across the globe gathered, not in conquest, but in cooperation. They spoke different languages. They carried different wounds, but they shared a single dream: that peace could be made stronger than war. From this dream, the United Nations was born. Its purpose was simple, but profound: to provide a place for dialogue, to prevent future conflict, and to protect human dignity. It was not perfect. No institution is, but it was a promise, a start. And for a world so recently shattered, a start was everything. In cities once destroyed by fire and grief, life began again. Children returned to schools, now filled with chalkboards instead of fear. Libraries reopened. Music filled concert halls. Artists painted what words could not express. Old enemies signed treaties. Borders were redrawn not just with maps, but with minds willing to imagine a different way. Even where pain lingered, in ashes and silence, healing took root. Slowly, tenderly. In Japan and Germany, democracy emerged from the ruins. Factories turned from weapons to tools. Farmers planted seeds not just in soil, but in trust. And across the world, people began to tell their stories. Some spoke of loss, others of resistance. Many simply bore witness so that others might remember, so that the future might learn. We learned that fear can divide, but compassion can unite. We learned that walls may crumble, but kindness endures. We learned that peace is not a moment. It is a choice made again and again. The Second World War left deep marks on humanity, but it also left seeds of cooperation, of awareness, of resolve. It showed us how fragile our world can be and how powerful our shared humanity truly is. Today, when we look back, it is not to glorify war. It is to remember the weight of its silence, the value of its lessons, the strength of those who rebuilt, and to whisper gently to the future, let us choose the better path. Let us listen before we shout. Let us heal before we harm, because peace is possible when we make it together. This has been Echoes of the Earth. Thank you for walking with us, through the quiet, through the chaos, and into the light that followed. Tonight, let the world fall away. Let the hum of the day fade into stillness. You are safe. You are home. And the story that follows is a quiet one. A story not of battle, but of peace. The kind that hums gently beneath the surface of time. Once, not so long ago in the wide arc of history, the world stood at the edge of great sorrow. It passed through a long night, a night lit by fires, darkened by fear. But after every night comes morning, and the people of the earth, weary, bruised, but unbroken, turned their faces toward the sun. They stepped out from the rubble, brushed dust from their sleeves, and chose to begin again, not with noise, but with quiet hope. Some picked up hammers to rebuild what was lost. Others picked up pens to write new laws, new promises. And still others planted gardens where silence once lived. Tomatoes, tulips, and memory. They chose to believe in the soft power of kindness, to trust the hush of healing over the roar of revenge. And slowly, like spring, peace returned. Now close your eyes if they haven't already begun to close. Feel the breath rise and fall, like the waves that carried soldiers home, like the wind that passed over fields once marked by war, now green and still. In the quiet that follows great noise, we learn what matters. That unity does not need to shout. That peace begins in the gentle choices. A hand held, a word forgiven, a bridge mended. And history, when we listen with care, becomes a lullaby. Not to forget, but to remember without fear. To understand without pain. To say, this happened. We grew. We remember. We choose peace. You are part of that peace. Here, tonight, resting beneath the sky that watched it all, and now watches over you. Breathe. Be still. Let the echoes become whispers, and the whispers become dreams. Good night, traveler of time. May you wake in a world that always remembers, and always chooses the gentler path.